Clutch closers. It is story time now. We're going to slow it down. Wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. Hold on a second. Just stop. Hold on, this doesn't feel right. I knew I was missing something. Okay. Clutch closers. It is story time. If there's one area that people tend to overlook when we're talking about practicing, it's reading. And most people that I talk to, they don't even know how to read. They don't know what's expected of them to read. And reading is a muscle. It's something that you have to train. It's something that you have to use every day. And if you talk to somebody like my man Charlie Munger here, you know who Charlie Munger is? Some of you know who he is. That's Warren Buffett's right-hand man. That's the guy that's getting stuff done. Warren Buffett's he's more of every man's man. He's me and you. But Charlie Munger's all about the numbers. And both of them will tell you the one thing they do all day is they read over 500 pages a day. And what gave me the idea for this is recently Warren Buffett had his earnings came out, and he talked about successors, and he talked about the new guy on the block, Todd Combs, and what he's doing for the company, and he's a very young man. And they talked about what kind of trades he makes and what kind of supervision they give him. And they said, you know, the truth is he doesn't make a lot of trades. Todd spends most of his time reading. How much time do you spend during the day reading? How much time do I spend? I still don't think I spend enough time during the day reading, but they 500 pages a day. But let's talk about what to read and how to read. So what's acceptable level of reading? I'm going to tell you something as small as 5 pages a day is completely and totally acceptable. Don't worry about the fact that Warren Buffett and them read 500 pages a day. That's insane. I'm not to that level. I don't expect you to be to that level, but you've got to start somewhere. And that's not to say that you can't get to 500 pages a day. I would aspire to be there, but let's just start somewhere. And then if we're going to start somewhere and we're going to start on 5 pages a day, what does it need to be? It needs to be something that you take interest in. It needs to be something that you're concentrating on. And right now, you're here, you're watching this. I'm assuming you want to be a better closer. You're wanting to better your life and your career. And so that's what we're looking at first. But it doesn't have to be that. My introduction to reading was, what are we looking at? This was my introduction to reading. It was Harry Potter. That's what got me started in it. Maybe that's the Harry Potter glasses? I don't know, but not saying that's why I got on Harry Potter glasses, but that's what started me in reading. I read the whole series and I loved it. And then I stopped and I thought, man, maybe I need to read something else. And so I started reading in historical figures, and I went down and my next one was Benjamin Franklin. And you know Benjamin Franklin, what can you learn from a guy like Benjamin Franklin? Do you know when Benjamin Franklin showed up in Boston, and he didn't have a lot going for him, he wanted people to think he did. So he would take for his printing company, and he would load up all the paper and the rolls, and he'd put them on a cart, and he'd push them to one end of the town. And he'd unload them. And then he'd take an empty cart back, and he'd load it up, and then he'd take it back down, and he'd unload those, he'd load the cart that he had, and he'd bring a full cart back. And when he wasn't doing anything, you remember, we've talked a little bit about luck, we've talked about what champs do. They keep busy, right? Benjamin Franklin understood that. He kept busy, just moving from one end of town to the next, and he was doing nothing but moving. For lack of a better word, he was just busting useless rocks. But people saw him being busy, keeping busy, and moving. And they said, you know what? Look at that guy out there. He's very industrious. That Ben Franklin, that's a guy that I want to do business with because he never stops. And then all of a sudden I realized maybe I'm on to something. So I started looking. He was the first rock star too, by the way. But maybe I was on to something, and I could start looking from historical figures that I could pull from. But maybe you're not ready for Harry Potter. Maybe that's not what pulls you in. Maybe you're not ready for this just quite yet to pull you there. That's okay. Remember, we've got to start somewhere. We've got to start working that reading muscle. Maybe you just like comics. Comics are okay too. Have you ever seen that new Umbrella Academy? It's on Netflix. It's dig back. I don't know what year you're watching this thing in. It came out in 2018, 19. And I'm going to tell you something. The comics, as short and simple as they are, they're still better than that was on Netflix. This pulls you in, and it was so much better. And it made the show a little bit better, or worse, depending upon your perspective. Maybe the show would have been better had I not read these. I don't know, but you got to start somewhere, and this is perfectly acceptable. So maybe you don't look at that, and you want to look again. You know, George Washington. If you want to believe in how the country came about, if there's any person who made this country what it is, and the reason why we exist today, it's him. He understood how to lead, and he led from out front. He always was in front with his sword. He understood where he needed to be on the battlefield. He also understood the power of retreat. One thing they don't talk about when we talk about George Washington enough is he understood when and where to retreat off the battlefield. A great life lesson that you can learn from a founding father that most people don't know. Sure, you can know what year he born, what year he died. He's on the $1 bill. But how to retreat, that's a good life lesson to learn. And Washington's the guy to teach it to you. But you're here to close. And you want to learn how to close the car deal. You want to be better at closing the car deal. So maybe you need to be picking up some books by my man Robert Cialdini. He's a PhD who's done nothing but study closes, how to close, when to close. He lived and worked the part as a real estate agent and a car salesman, studying us in the natural habitat and how we close car deals. That's what he does. He's got Influence, national bestseller, The Psychology of Persuasion. He goes through all the, I believe it's 7 psychological steps and biases that he believes come into helping you close and why people close and what we use to close car deals to break down that fear, that uncertainty, that doubt. Cialdini's your man to figure it out. He also wrote the book, Yes, 50 Scientifically Proven Ways to Get to Yes. That's Cialdini. This is a great book, and it's not a book that you have to read from cover to cover. You can pick it up, open a page, and start reading. It's an easy way to go. But if we want to talk about what to read, it's not just enough to talk about that. It's got to talk a little bit about how to read. How do you go? Reading needs to be an adventure. If you want to learn, you have to start somewhere. So let's say you pick up a book by Robert Cialdini, and you read one book. And maybe you say, all right, well, what else did he write? Well, he wrote this book right here, so I'm going to read it too. So where do you go from there? Well, you know, the easiest place to start is, one, if you're reading a book and the author talks about another book in the book, pick up your phone right then, hit Amazon, and order that book. And just have it setting off to the side. And you start a stack, you know, that starts looking like this. When you got, that's your reading stack that you got going. Somebody walks up to you that you know, they say, hey man, I read such and such book and I think you would like it too. Don't question it. It's $10, it's $15. What is that out of your life? Hit the buy button, get the book to the house and have it sitting in your stack. Maybe you like to download them. I'm not a download guy. I don't like to download books. I like to be able to take a book and I like to be able to thump it, listen to it, and I like to be able to pick it up, smell it. See, that smells like a good book to me, and you can't get that from a download, and there's too many distractions on an iPad. I tried that before, and I downloaded the books, and I had them all in my iPad, and it was great, and I could flip, but guess what? I'm hitting the button, I'm pulling up Facebook, I'm going to YouTube, I'm doing anything other than reading at that point. There's too many distractions. But where do you go from here? So if we look at Cialdini's book, in the back, you go towards a bibliography. And inside the bibliography, that tells you where the author got all his information from. That's where the credits of the book go. So if you want to know everything that he knows, everything he used to write this book, it's all back here inside the bibliography. So if I want to look at something and I'm reading on page 157, how to say no, and using social proof to get there. I can flip back here to the back of the book and find it. Hold on one second. Let me get my glasses. Reading for page 157, and it's telling me the next book that I need to look at. If I really want to dig into that, I need to look on something by Aronson E. D.L. Linder, Gain and Loss of Esteem as Determinants of Interpersonal attractiveness. Now it sounds boring, but it's an adventure. I probably never would read that book, but it's an adventure. It's an adventure that can take you on as you go. And are you going to make mistakes and buy some books that you don't want to read? Like say, you know, at some point in my life I thought about Voltaire. Don't do it. I mean, just don't click it. Somebody may come to you and say, hey, you need to read Voltaire. Trust me, do not click it. Unless, I mean, you might be having trouble sleeping or something. Don't click it. So that's kind of how to read. That's the adventure that reading takes you on, and where do you focus your attention as you move. And again, don't feel bad if you read 2 pages a night. Don't feel bad if you read 3 pages a night. Just concentrate on what you're reading and whether or not you enjoy it. It'll get better. It gets easier. You have to train that muscle. It's one thing to read a page. It's another thing to take it in and absorb it and understand what you just read. And you know, we talked about NLP. You'll hear me talk about that sometimes in our videos. This is where it started with me. The new technology Technology of Achievement, NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, it comes there. If you want to understand kind of how we got to where we are, maybe you start with The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. I'm telling you, there's nothing sacrilegious about understanding the evolution of man and where it comes from. This was all given to us by, I believe, God gave it to us. He helped us evolve and become what we are and what I am today. You're trying to evolve right now. It's real. If you want to understand that and learn how to think backwards, the strongest thing you can learn from Charles Darwin is how to think backwards. Disprove your theory first. Don't try to prove your theory. Learn how to disprove it. That's where it comes from. But did you know Darwin had a blind spot that you could look at? He concentrates mostly on social evolution, but there's also symbiosis of evolution and how things work together, and Darwin didn't look at that. If you want to know, that helps you build rapport, understanding how and why things work together. That was inside of Darwin's blind spot. That's how it applies to closing when you get there. The essays of Warren Buffett. If you want the folkiest little wisdom nuggets that you can see, and you see where I've got all my pages marked and highlighted as you read the essays of Warren Buffett, there's not a lot of books out there by him or for him. It's there. The Science of Influence when you get there. Oh, look, we got Grant too. If you want to know, if Ulysses S. Grant, most of them just think that he was the guy who led and won the Civil War. But did you know he was a president too? Not a lot of people know that. Did you know without him and this guy right here, without Washington, you probably wouldn't have a country today? These two people are two of the most influential people in our country's history and where and how they work from. And this guy started from nothing. You want a guy... I thought maybe I had Napoleon in here too. But if you want a guy that started from nothing, that's Grant, man. If you want to learn another lesson from him, a guy was kicked out. He joined the military, fought in the Mexican War, got kicked out for being an alcoholic. He couldn't hold a job anywhere, anyhow. He's getting fired. He's wondering what he's going to do. His dad finally gives him a job. He can't hold that. They don't know what to do about him. And then the people used to joke about him because he would read the paper and he would read about these wars going on in Europe, and he would sit over there and smirk and say what he would have done to win those battles. And they like, sure you would, Grant. Good job, bud. Yeah, man, pound it out, Grant. We know you would have won it, right? Well, guess what? He's probably the greatest general ever that we've had, and he started with nothing. Next thing you know, a couple of years later, the guy's president of the United States. He was drummed out of the military for being an alcoholic and pretty much lost everything he owned. How to start from nothing, how to overcome life and life's objections. Remember, it's all about where you quit. He never quit. And that's the kind of adventure that you can go on. So then maybe you look and you read this book and I say, man, I like Ron Chernow. I like the way he wrote this book. So maybe I want to read other stuff by Ron Chernow. And you start buying books by him. What am I reading right now? I'm currently reading Chris Froome's biography, The Climb. It's an interesting book, and you want to talk about suffering, right? The one thing that keeps you from quitting in life is how much you can suffer, how many no's you can take, how many doors you can have slammed in your face. This guy right now has won the Tour de France 4 times. That guy's running, that's suffering. Cycling is suffering. He's talking about riding 27 days in a row over 100 miles a day, hard out as fast as he can go on a bike pedaling. How much suffering can he take? And it starts through his struggles in life and where he grew up in South Africa with nothing, and his brothers messing with him and his animals and feeding his rabbits to snakes. And where does that start out, and how does that end up being Chris Froome? And where am I going next? I haven't read this one yet. It's Business Adventures by John Brooks. But how did I find this book? I read one time recently, I saw Bill Gates, and Bill Gates says to Warren Buffett, he says, hey Warren, I still got that book you loaned me, Business Adventures by John Brooks. I still have your copy. And I thought, man, if that's good enough for Warren Buffett to read it, to talk to Bill Gates about it and him borrowing it, why do I not have it sitting in my reading list? So it's next up. And I don't know when I get to this, because you know what? I may come across another book between now and then that ends up on top of this stack and on top of this stack. But I've got a stack of books that it's going to be read, and they're there, and that's where we learn. That's how we seek wisdom. And speaking of seeking wisdom, you have to take these books and pay them forward. And the most influential book ever in my life is right here. I don't have it here personally because I give it to somebody. Occasionally somebody comes around that I think deserves this book, that I think might read this book. And it's From Darwin to Munger, Seeking Wisdom by Peter Bevelin. And it was one of the books, I got it from in here when I was reading the Poor Charlie's Almanac, which was also one of the first books that I read early on. And I dove into the back of the book and I dove into the bibliography, and this started a huge stack of books that I had, and that was one of the books that I got from this. So I started out with a little kind of almost hokey tabletop book. You know, this would be a coffee table book. But inside this book, it gave me one of the most influential books in my life. And Munger has used it. He's referred back to it many a times in his life. Peter Bevelin, Seeking Wisdom. I'll put a link down below. We'll see if it's on Amazon. We'll put it there so you can pull it up. Because that book, if you're going to make a mistake, it tells you how you're going to make a mistake. It tells you all the biases that you use in your body, that your brain uses to make a mistake and to make a bad decision. If you make a bad decision in your life, odds are, guaranteed 100%, you made it because of one of these biases. So if you understand what those biases are, they can help you from not making a mistake. Because the truth is, you don't have to do a lot of things right in life to look like a genius, as long as you don't do a lot of things wrong. And Peter Bevelin, Seeking Wisdom, will teach you that. It shows you how to go and how you apply it to your life and your business, and it goes through the steps and the processes. Anyway, it's the most important book I've had in my life that I refer back to daily, that I pull off the nightstand anytime I'm in between books. I don't have it here today with me again because I've given it to somebody else. Somebody else's mind. They showed a little sparkle in their eye, and I give them my copy, and I need to buy another one. In fact, I didn't even realize I didn't have my copy until I got ready to bring those over and make this video today. But listen, that's how to read. And reading has to start, and it needs to be an adventure, and it needs to be something that you do every single day. It needs to be part of your practice and part of your life. It's how you're going to close the deal. You can use something from a little piece from each one of these people to make you who you are. Because ultimately, that's what you are. You're made up of two things: your life experiences and what you read. And that's how you're going to be clutching the close, and that's how you're going to close the deal. Start a list now. Start your stack.